You have been deadlifting for years. Your numbers have gone up, your posterior chain has grown. You feel strong. But something else has been happening at the same time. Something you cannot see. Something that does not always hurt until it is too late to ignore. Every single rep of every single set, your lumbar spine has been absorbing forces that research now measures at up to 18,000 newtons of compression. That is approximately the weight of 2 full-size cars pressing down on 5 small bones in your lower back. And most gym athletes are loading those forces through a spine that is not in the position to handle them safely. Not because they are weak, not because they do not train hard, but because nobody has ever shown them what is actually happening inside the spine during every pull they have ever done. In this video, we are going to look inside the deadlift, not from the outside, not from the perspective of coaching cues and form tips, from the perspective of anatomy and biomechanics research published in 2025. You are going to see exactly which spinal structures are under load during every phase of the lift. You are going to understand the specific mechanical mistakes that shift that load from the structures that can handle it to the structures that cannot. And you are going to leave with a precise technical protocol that will change the way you set up, brace, and execute every deadlift from this point forward. If this is your first time on Functional Anatomy Hub, this is what we do here. We teach your body to you from the inside out. Subscribe now so you never miss a breakdown. Let us get into the anatomy. To understand what the deadlift does to your spine, you first need to understand the spine itself. Your lumbar spine consists of 5 vertebrae, L1 through L5. These are the largest vertebrae in the entire spinal column because they carry the most load. Between each pair of vertebrae sits an intervertebral disc. The disc has 2 components. The outer layer is called the annulus fibrosus, a tough ring of collagen fibers arranged in alternating diagonal layers. The inner core is called the nucleus pulposus, a gel-like structure that distributes compressive forces in all directions like a pressurized cushion. When your spine is in a neutral position and your trunk is properly braced, the disc performs brilliantly under load. The nucleus pulposus distributes force evenly outward against the annulus fibrosus in all directions. The annulus fibrosus resists that outward pressure with its layered collagen structure. This is how the disc is designed to work. But when the spine deviates from neutral, either into flexion, extension, or lateral deviation, the pressure distribution inside the disc becomes asymmetric. One side of the disc bears more compression, the other side bears more tension. The nucleus pulposus is pushed toward the side under tension. Do this repeatedly under high load and the annulus fibrosus develops micro tears. The nucleus begins to track through those tears. That is a disc herniation. Now let's talk about the muscles that protect the spine during the deadlift. The primary stabilizers are the erector spinae, 3 columns of muscle running alongside the spine from the pelvis to the upper back. During the deadlift, the erectors work isometrically, meaning they contract without changing length to hold the lumbar spine in extension against the flexion force created by the loaded barbell. Deeper than the erectors sits the multifidus, the segmental stabilizer that controls individual vertebra movement. The multifidus prevents individual vertebrae from shifting or rotating relative to each other during the pull. And surrounding the entire trunk is the thoracolumbar fascia, a thick sheet of connective tissue that connects the lats above, the glutes below, and the deep abdominal muscles at the front. When you brace correctly before a deadlift, you are creating tension through this entire fascial system. You are essentially creating a rigid cylinder of pressure around your lumbar spine that protects every disc and vertebra inside it. When you do not brace correctly, that cylinder collapses, and the discs and facet joints absorb forces they were never designed to bear alone. There are also 2 structures that most gym athletes never consider when thinking about their deadlift: the facet joints. These are small paired joints at the back of each vertebrae that guide spinal movement and prevent excessive rotation. Under a neutral lumbar spine, they contribute very little to load bearing. Under a hyperextended lumbar spine, which is very common in the deadlift lockout, they become primary load bearers. They were not designed for this role, and they tell you about it immediately with a sharp localized pain directly over the lower lumbar spine. Now let's take a detailed look at the biomechanics of the deadlift phase by phase. Phase 1 is the setup. The bar is on the floor. You approach it, hinge at the hip, grip the bar, and prepare to lift. Research published in 2025 confirms that the setup position is where most mechanical errors begin, long before the bar ever leaves the floor. The most critical variable in the setup is the position of the lumbar spine. A neutral lumbar spine in the setup means the natural inward curve of the lower back is preserved. This positions the intervertebral discs so that load distribution is even across the entire disc surface. But when a lifter reaches down to the bar and their hips are too high or their hamstrings too tight to maintain lumbar extension, the lower back rounds. The lumbar spine moves into flexion. The posterior portion of each disc is now under dramatically increased compression. The nucleus pulposus is pushed backward toward the spinal canal. And this is before a single kilogram has left the floor. Phase 2 is the liftoff, the moment the bar breaks from the ground. Research has identified this as the most mechanically demanding moment of the entire lift. The compressive forces on the lumbar spine at liftoff have been measured at up to 18,000 newtons in trained male lifters. To put that in context, the injury threshold for lumbar spinal compression is estimated between 5,000 and 10,000 newtons. This means at liftoff, trained deadlifters regularly experience forces that exceed the theoretical injury threshold. The reason they don't injure themselves every session is because of one thing: the integrity of the muscular and fascial system surrounding the spine. When that system is braced correctly and the spine is in a neutral position, those forces are shared across the entire system. When that system is not braced or the spine is out of position, those forces concentrate on individual discs and facet joints.
From liftoff to lockout. During this phase, two things are happening simultaneously. The hips are extending, driven by the glutes and hamstrings. The spine is resisting flexion, held in extension by the erector spinae. The critical biomechanical variable here is the rate at which the hips rise relative to the bar. In an ideal pull, the bar, the hips, and the shoulders all rise at the same rate in the early portion of the lift. When the hips rise faster than the bar, a common error called the stiff leg turn, the lift converts from a hip hinge into a back extension. The erector spinae are now generating the primary force to move the load. They are being used as prime movers under maximum load. They were designed to be stabilizers. Phase 4 is the lockout, the top of the movement. This is where a second and equally damaging error occurs. Many gym athletes hyperextend the lumbar spine at lockout. They lean back, thrust their hips forward past the bar, and arch their lower back excessively. At this moment, the facet joints at the back of each lumbar vertebrae are compressed together with the full weight of the lift still on the bar. The shear forces across the L5-S1 disc at hyperextended lockout are among the highest measured at any point in the entire lift. Yet this position is celebrated in many lifting communities as full extension. It is not full extension. It is hyperextension, and it is one of the primary causes of facet joint syndrome and disc pathology in powerlifters and gym athletes. Now let us look at how load intensity affects all of this. Studies published in 2025 comparing deadlift mechanics at 70%, 90%, and 100% of maximum found that as load increases, lumbar flexion increases. The spine that held neutral at 70% begins to round at 90. The spine that held at 90 loses position at 100. This means that every athlete has a load threshold beyond which their spine mechanics break down. And most gym athletes push through that threshold regularly without ever identifying where it is. Let us go through the 5 most damaging mistakes gym athletes make in the deadlift and the exact anatomy behind each one. Mistake 1. Pulling with a rounded lower back. When the lumbar spine flexes under load, the posterior annulus fibrosus is placed under combined compression and tension simultaneously. The compressive side pushes the nucleus pulposus backward. The tension side stretches the annulus collagen fibers beyond their safe range. With heavy enough loads and enough repetitions, the annulus develops radial fissures, small cracks that track from the inner nucleus outward. Initially, these fissures cause no symptoms because there are no nerve endings in the inner 2/3 of the annulus fibrosus. The damage progresses silently until the nucleus tracks far enough through the fissure to reach the outer third of the annulus, which is richly innervated. That is when the pain begins, and by that point, the structural damage is already significant. Mistake 2. Allowing the hips to rise faster than the bar at liftoff. This error converts the deadlift from a hip-dominant movement into a lower back-dominant movement. The moment the hips rise while the bar stays on the floor, the torso angle becomes more horizontal. The moment arm between the bar and the lumbar spine increases dramatically. A longer moment arm means more torque. More torque means more demand on the erector spinae to resist spinal flexion. More demand on the erectors means more compressive force on the lumbar discs. All of this happens in the first fraction of a second after the bar leaves the floor. Mistake 3. Hyperextending at lockout. The hyperextended lockout compresses the lumbar facet joints under load. But there is a second mechanism that makes this error even more damaging. When the lumbar spine hyperextends at lockout, the L5-S1 disc, the lowest disc in the lumbar spine, is subjected to extremely high anterior shear forces. Anterior shear force means the L5 vertebrae is being pushed forward relative to the sacrum below it. The structures resisting this forward movement are the annulus fibrosus of the L5-S1 disc and the anterior longitudinal ligament. Repeated hyperextension under heavy loads stresses these structures progressively. This is the primary mechanism behind spondylolisthesis, a condition where one vertebrae slips forward over the one below it. Mistake 4. Failing to brace before each rep. Intra-abdominal pressure is the single most important protective mechanism for the lumbar spine during the deadlift. When you breathe deeply into your belly and brace your entire trunk before the pull, you create a pressurized chamber of air inside the abdominal cavity. This pressure pushes outward against the abdominal wall at the front, the pelvic floor at the bottom, and the thoracolumbar fascia at the back. This outward pressure creates an extensor moment on the lumbar spine. It literally helps to hold the lumbar spine in extension. Research estimates that proper intra-abdominal pressure can reduce lumbar compressive forces by up to 40% during heavy lifting. Athletes who do not brace between reps are removing this 40% reduction on every rep. They are lifting without the most powerful protective mechanism available to them. Mistake 5. Progressing load faster than technique can support. As load increases toward and beyond 90% of maximum, spinal mechanics deteriorate in even experienced lifters. The spine that looks technically perfect at 80% begins to round at 90%, but the athlete cannot feel the rounding because the weight demands all of their conscious attention. This is why filming your side profile at working weight is not optional. It is the only objective way to identify your load threshold, the weight above which your lumbar mechanics break down. Training consistently above your load threshold is how disc injuries accumulate over months and years without any dramatic incident. There is no moment where you feel it happen. There is only a morning some months from now when you bend down to pick something up and your back does not allow it. Here's your complete deadlift spine protection protocol. Step 1. Establish your neutral lumbar spine before you touch the bar. Stand tall and find the position where your lower back has its natural inward curve. Now, hip hinge. Push your hips back while maintaining that exact curve. If you can maintain it all the way to the bar on the floor, your mobility is sufficient for conventional deadlift. If your lower back rounds before you reach the bar, you have two options. Raise the bar by using plates or a rack pull until you can maintain neutral, or prioritize hip hinge mobility work before returning to floor pulls. Step 2. Create maximum intra-abdominal pressure before every single rep. Stand behind the bar, take a deep diaphragmatic breath, expand your belly, your sides, and your lower back simultaneously. Hold that breath and brace your entire trunk as hard as you can against it. Your core should feel like a pressurized cylinder. Only then do you grip the bar. Only then do you initiate the pull. Do not breathe again until the rep is complete and the bar is back on the floor. On heavy sets, reset your brace completely between every single rep. Step 3. Drive the floor away rather than pull the bar up. When you think about pulling the bar up, the upper body activates first and the hips tend to rise ahead of the bar. When you think about pushing the floor away from you through your feet, the legs activate first. The hips and bar rise together. The moment arm between the bar and the lumbar spine stays constant through the initial phase of the pull. This simple cue shift keeps the moment arm as short as possible at liftoff. Step 4. Finish at true lockout, not hyperextension. True lockout means your hips are directly under your shoulders, your glutes are fully contracted, and your lumbar spine is in neutral. Your body should form a vertical straight line from shoulder to ankle. There is no lean back, there is no hip thrust past the bar, there is no excessive lumbar arch. Stand tall, squeeze the glutes hard at the top, lower the bar under control. Step 5. Identify and respect your load threshold. Every single session, film your deadlift from the side at every working weight you use. Watch the video and identify the exact load at which your lumbar spine loses neutral. That weight is your current load threshold. Train at and below that threshold with perfect mechanics. Use progressive overload to raise that threshold over time. Never train regularly above it. Your long-term deadlift numbers will be higher and your spine will be intact to lift them if you respect this boundary than if you ignore it. The deadlift is not a dangerous exercise. Improper mechanics under high load repeated over months and years is dangerous. The distinction matters because the deadlift done correctly is one of the most powerful tools available for building a resilient posterior chain and a spine that can handle the demands of training for decades. What makes it dangerous is the gap between what athletes believe they are doing and what the anatomy shows is actually happening. 18,000 newtons at liftoff, forces that exceed theoretical injury thresholds on every heavy pull. A lumbar spine protected only by the quality of the brace, the position of the spine, and the integrity of the movement pattern. Now you know what those forces are. Now you know exactly which structures bear them and how. And now you have the protocol to ensure those forces are distributed safely every time you pull. In the next video, we're going to break down the bench press, specifically why shoulder pain during pressing is almost never a shoulder problem, and what the anatomy shows is actually happening. If today's breakdown gave you something that changes how you train, subscribe and leave a comment below telling me what weight you're going to reset your working sets to while you rebuild your mechanics. Train smarter,